Sherman Hill is a route I remember well from Train Simulator Classic. I enjoyed driving on it from time to time, and a decent amount of Union Pacific locomotives were available as add-ons for the route, on top of the good selection included with the base route itself. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for its Train Sim World counterpart. Here are my 2 cents on the TSW version of Sherman Hill. Generally, I'm not a fan of US freight routes in TSW, and the only reason I ended up with Sherman Hill is because I got the route free of charge during the Steam Winter Sale in December 2024. More specifically, only the version compatible with TSW2 was free, but Steam automatically added it to my TSW5 collection. The only other time I remember seeing a TSW route offered free of charge was back in June 2023, when I got LGV Méditerranée, but for various reasons, I now consider Marseille to Avignon to be the worst route in TSW history. Incidentally, the version of Sherman Hill that's compatible with TSW5 normally costs $43.59 NZD at full price. Make of that what you will, dear viewer. This is a remake of the Cheyenne to Laramie route that we already had in TS Classic since September 2012, with the TSW version being released in November 2021. Annoyingly, the remake does not include the Track 3 diversion between Dale Junction and Cheyenne. Why this was omitted is anyone's guess, but curiously, you do get the diversion between Laramie and Hermosa. As is often the case with DTG's decisions on what sections they do or don't include in a TSW route, the situation on Sherman Hill left me confused and wondering what the hell Dovetail thought they were playing at. As for motive power, this route only includes 2 locomotives, namely the EMD SD70 ACE and SD40-2 in the Union Pacific Armour Yellow livery. From memory, the SD70 ACE was a new addition to TSW, while we already had a different variant of the SD40-2 with Sandpatch grade of March 2017. Personally, I think the motive power selection on Sherman Hill in TSW is very disappointing compared to its TS Classic counterpart, which includes 5 locomotives. Come to think of it, imagine the gas turbine electric locomotive in TSW. That would be pretty cool if you ask me. So far, there has only been one post-release add-on for the Sherman Hill route, namely the Union Pacific Heritage Collection Pack of February 2023. It includes all 6 of UP's SD70 ACE heritage units, and I picked this lot up for $8.79 NZD during the aforementioned Steam Winter Sale. I sure as hell wouldn't pay full price for what are essentially just a bunch of reskins, but why they were sold separately instead of included with the base route is anyone's guess. In any case, Dovetail missed a trick by not modelling a shunter for use in the big yard at Cheyenne. The shunter could have been included with the base route, or, more likely, put up as a separately sold add-on. Come to think of it, and not counting mods, the only end-cab US diesels that we've ever seen in TSW are the Amtrak SW1000R and Caltrain MP15DC, but I never got the former. Here's a thought. Since Dovetail are making New York City to Stamford, Connecticut for TSW, that would be a good opportunity to bring back the SW1000R. Thinking back to the Union Pacific Heritage units, these recreations in TSW look fine to me, and I especially like 1996, the Southern Pacific engine, but I don't know enough about these locomotives to point out any inaccuracies. Anyone who's more knowledgeable on these things is welcome to leave a comment and tell us if DTG screwed anything up. Much like the CSX variants that come with Sandpatch grade, the Union Pacific SD40-2 has openable panels on one side of the long hood, with parts of the prime mover visible inside. It's a very small addition to the immersion in the grand scheme of things, but it's a welcome addition nonetheless. Now I don't know about you, but personally, I've always considered the classic Union Pacific variant of the EMD SD40-2 to be one of the USA's signature diesel locomotives. As for the freight wagon types that are included with the route, they are the 60-foot Plate F boxcar, a reefer of some kind, an 89-foot auto rack, 3-bay covered hopper, 30,500-gallon tanker, Bethgon 2 coal gondola, and 53-foot container wagons, otherwise known as well cars. I'm not sure if the boxcar and reefer are reused from previous add-ons, but I know that this auto rack is the same one that we already had with Sandpatch Grade or CN Oakville Subdivision, albeit with a change of logo, and DTG would go on to repackage it with Cajon Pass too. As for the other wagons, they are all reused from Sandpatch Grade too, except the 3-bay covered hopper, which apparently made its debut with the infamous Cane Creek. Come to think of it, Dovetail would be onto a winner if they ever modelled Big Boy 4014 and FEF-3 number 844, or even TTT-6 number 5511 for Sherman Hill in TSW, although they would need to get their act together and fix the issues with steam simulation and physics before making add-ons with 4014, 844 and 5511, or any American steam locomotives for that matter, such as McLeod River Railroad number 25. Speaking of which, this footage wasn't recorded by me, but rather a friend of Mum's who lives in the States. The prime mover audio on the Union Pacific SD40-2 is reused from the CSX variant, but the horn is noticeably different, and a damn sight better for that matter. As for the SD70 ACE, her prime mover sounds weirdly similar to the UK's Class 66, to the point where I think DTG might have reused and slightly altered the 66 audio for the SD70 ACE. On first impression, I thought these locomotives had decent sounding horns, but for all I know, they may not be accurate, and the SD70 ACE's horn is too quiet for my liking. In timetable mode, you get 110 playable services for the SD70 ACE, but only 11 for the SD40-2. The SD70 ACE is used to haul intermodal, coal, automotive, grain, manifest, or ethanol trains over the main route, while the SD40-2 is only used for shunting services in Cheyenne, Wycombe, and Laramie. Meanwhile, the SD70 ACE heritage units do not add any additional services to the timetable. Instead, they merely substitute into the existing services. The full run from Cheyenne to Laramie takes at least 1 hour and 30 minutes to complete, but if such a long run is not your cup of tea, you also have the option to run shorter services between Laramie and Hermosa, which only take around 30 minutes to complete. Or you could drive on a route with less boring terrain and more service variation. I should also mention that there are no banking/helper services on Sherman Hill's timetable, unlike on Sandpatch Grade, Peak Forest, and the Mine Spessart Bahn. Not sure about Horseshoe Curve since I haven't got that route, and have no intention of picking it up anytime soon. As for how to set up the Union Pacific locomotives, it's a little different from comparatively simple electric multiple units like the Metro North M7A and M3A. In the case of the SD40-2, the setup method is as follows. Flip the generator field, fuel pump, and engine run switches to on, insert the reverser handle, set the automatic brake to release, and set the cutoff valve to freight, as opposed to brown streak. Then open the throttle and you're away. If you're using 2 or more locomotives, then the generator field, fuel pump, and engine run switches only need to be thrown in the leading cab. As for the SD70 ACE, her setup method is mostly the same as the SD40-2, although, in this case, the brakes have to be configured on a screen directly in front of the driver's seat. There are big freight yards and sizable towns at both ends of this route, but for most, if not all, of the journey, you'll just be driving through the wide open plains of Wyoming, with one tunnel and occasional rock formations to see as you go along. Given the presence of those big yards, not to mention the Laramie Cement Works, Granite Quarry, and Wycombe Chemical Plant, the minimal amount of available shunting services is quite disappointing. If you don't count tutorials and scenarios, there's only one service each for the Granite Quarry and Laramie Cement Works, with those two services being a two-parter of sorts. Come to think of it, none of the timetable mode services have real train symbols as their names. Instead, they all have generic names like Chemical Switching, Cheyenne Yard to Laramie Yard, or Laramie Yard to Hermosa. I heard reports of the scenery on this route not being all that good, so I was curious to see it for myself, and I can safely say that there's a lot of room for improvement. For starters, the road next to Laramie Yard is visibly floating above the ground, and the nearby houses look similarly basic to those on the Peninsula Corridor route. I don't like the look of this wide open space on the opposite side of the yard, but this could be realistic for all I know. Anyone who's more familiar with Laramie in real life is welcome to leave a comment and tell us how accurate this is. As for any other issues I noticed on the route, these included, but were not limited to, the lack of chain animation on the SD40-2's rear platform, the inability to do cold start procedures on the locomotives in timetable mode, the visible paved roads being completely devoid of traffic outside of Cheyenne and Laramie, the level crossing just east of Buford not activating, and the point where distant scenery ends being clearly visible throughout a lot of the route. It's especially bad at the western end of Wycombe Chemical Plant. To be fair, the scenery is noticeably more interesting/varied between Buford and Hermosa, especially with the rock formations near Dale Junction. I know almost nothing about American signalling, so I can't comment on whether or not there are any errors with the signalling on Sherman Hill. If there are any errors, then they've gone over my head, without referencing Tony Basil and what I consider to be the best song she ever recorded. I've known about Union Pacific for much longer than the other Class 1 railroads. That's Danny Harmon's Local, Norfolk Shit Show, and Beansniff. But even though I think Union Pacific is cool, I'm not impressed with the TSW version of Sherman Hill. That's not because of my general lack of interest in US freight routes, but mainly because of the bad scenery throughout a large portion of the route, a very limited motive power offering, questionable sounds on the SD70 ACE, minimal shunting services, the generally Spartan timetable, and the omission of a proper shunter locomotive. The fact that I got this route for free doesn't make the aforementioned issues any less frustrating, or excuse them, for that matter. The timetable has barely any service variation outside of the point A to B runs with the SD70 ACE, most of which are over an hour long. In addition, I find the driving experience on this route quite boring due to the very remote environment and lack of stops and services with the SD70 ACE, so there's barely anything to do as you're driving along. Incidentally, when I drove a trio of SD70 ACEs on a westbound autorack train, with the cheap and nothing wasted heritage unit leading, a large part of the climb from Cheyenne to Sherman Hill summit was spent crawling up a 1 in 67 grade with the throttle wide open, but the speed limit hovering around a pathetic 22 miles per hour, and the highest speed I got up to throughout the entire run was only around 40 miles per hour. Even if the Union Pacific SD40-2 wasn't one of my favourite American diesels, I'd still be annoyed by her low amount of playable services, and her situation reminds me of the Deutsche Bahn BR204, which only has 7 services on the Main Spessartbahn. Sherman Hill is in dire need of a remaster, better timetable, and more locomotives, and in its current state, I would not recommend it to other TSW players, as it only deserves a 4 out of 10 as far as I'm concerned. One wonders why Dovetail chose this particular route for a free giveaway, but regardless of that little conundrum, if you've stayed watching right through to the end, you've won a small car that was previously used to carry Brett's newborn son. It's the Mini Cooper's Mini Cooper,